like you smoke weed, right? Okay, you're gonna smoke a bowl, you're gonna buy one of these TVs. Phillips, alright, you're kinda high, feels good. Samsung, kinda last year. Magnavox, bang!
As we see how far Jamie gets with customers, we also see that his silver tongue gets him far with the women. That in turn gets him fired from his job at the electronics store when his manager finds out that he's been screwing his girlfriend in the stockroom the whole time. Later that night, Jamie and his very successful family sit down at the dinner table to celebrate his brother's success. And that's when we find out how his brother, Josh, plans to help him.
If you suck on my I'll get you an interview.
Oh, Josh, watch your mouth!
How smooth he was in the initial delivery of that statement is enough to make any mother worry about it being true. But when he turned around and yelled back at her, it kind of took me by surprise. I would have been slapped into the next year if I'd done that. After Josh mentions how much money pharmaceutical reps make, Jamie defends it, and he gets Josh to call the Pfizer VP in the morning. After a rigorous training period, Jamie becomes an even better salesman, and he's placed in the Ohio Valley District to sell Zoloft.
What are you thinking about?
Money.
That's always a good driving factor for a salesman. I was over here thinking about how he's already slept with more women in the first 5 minutes of this movie than a lot of people do in a year. He should have gotten into the sex industry. Once Jamie heads into Ohio to work alongside his distinguished rep, Bruce, he realizes that this job isn't going to be as easy as selling a TV to a bunch of stoners. After he's turned down by multiple doctors who already seem to have their rebuttal prepared for such a time as this, he ends up getting a little discouraged and heads back to his house. With Pfizer merchandise all over the place, he begins to question if he made the right decision in career choices. When Bruce and Jamie meet the next day, Bruce sits there and talks about all of the women in the office, but Jamie turns theory into results as he explains the science of how to pick up women. After they come to one of their biggest clients, they realize that their competition has the upper hand on them, and they're stuck in the waiting room while they watch him walk on back. After leaving the office, Bruce explains how he needs to show income growth so he can make it to Chicago.
I got a hunch that you and your swinging might be my ticket to the big leagues.
Well, if that doesn't boost your self-esteem, then it just puts the pressure on this other man's entire life on your shoulders. Take it how you will. I'd say it's enough to put a slight chip on Jamie's shoulder. After multiple attempts to handle things the traditional way, Jamie ends up trying out his charm on the women of the office. That's enough to get him back to set up his samples, but it's not enough to make his product stand out. So he simply takes all of the Prozac samples when he goes back to set up his Zoloft samples. He dumps the Prozac in the dumpster outside and inadvertently gets homeless people to take Prozac from the dumpster. After more attempts, he realizes that his scheme still isn't working well enough, so he pays Dr. Knight, who's the big client he's supposed to be signing, to let him shadow him for a day. During that time, Jamie tries to upsell Zoloft to him while he's working on patients, but Dr. Knight comes to meet Maggie, who's there because she needs her Parkinson's disease medication. After she explains how she found out that she had early onset Parkinson's, she also has Dr. Knight check out a blotch on her breast. And Jamie introduces himself as an intern so he's able to stay in the room and see her too. Later in the parking lot, Maggie expresses what she thinks about that.
You're a drunk rebel! You let me take my shirt on you!
She's got a solid swing on that purse. It kinda makes you wonder if she picked up some bricks before she caught up to him. It's kinda hard to keep up the persona of being a medical intern when your entire trunk is filled with drug samples and Pfizer logos. He ends up trying to apologize to her in a way that he can still pick her up, but she's wise to his game. Later on, Jamie calls the receptionist to get Maggie's number, and right after that, Josh shows up at Jamie's doorstep crying about how his girlfriend kicked him out of their apartment. After Jamie decides to let Josh stay, he gives Maggie a call. Don't you love how his millionaire brother still comes to crash at his place for free when his relationship ends up sinking? That just goes to show that family is always where people look to first. Once Maggie answers, she's more intrigued by the fact that he actually went out of his way to get her number. After a lot of persistence, she finally says yes, and she tells him to meet her at her coffee shop that she works at. After she shows that she's no stranger to the game that he plays with women, she invites him back to her place, and the two of them have their fun. Maggie sends him on his way when they're done, and they decide to keep it casual. Really casual. She ends up paging him all the time, and he ends up meeting up with her when he wants to. I never thought I'd hear a pager beep again until I watched this movie, and the nightmare of beeps came rushing back. But they're definitely taking full advantage of having a friend for when they're in need.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! I didn't see that! My glasses are off! Josh!
That's one way to meet the family. After a bit of fun, Jamie seems to get a little too close to Maggie and alarms start going off in her head. She shuts down any attempt at getting closer and she moves on to having a good time again. The next day, Jamie goes about his normal business of replacing the Prozac samples with his Zoloft samples, but when he goes to the dumpster to throw them out, he is met by the Prozac rep. After a small physical confrontation, Jamie is left on the ground while the rep gets back to his car. As parting words, the rep tells Jamie to stay away from Maggie and he drives off. The next day, Jamie heads to Dr. Knight's office, but the girls don't allow him back this time. Apparently, the Prozac rep got to them and offered them a vacation to Hawaii to keep Jamie out. Later, Jamie goes to Maggie's with food and he lets it slip that he thinks it's nice. She tells him that she doesn't want him to want a relationship, so she tells him about how she was involved with the Prozac rep who broke her heart. Sure enough, after all that talk about relationships, he can't seem to get it up. Maggie is actually pretty understanding about the whole situation, but he kind of takes it a little harder than she does.
Don't worry about it.
I am worried about it.
Someone is a little caught up in his own head, and Maggie calls him out on it. She blames his random sense of humanity that makes him want something more. So instead of having sex, they end up sitting and talking the rest of the night away. It's during this conversation that Jamie finds out that Pfizer is making a drug for men who can't get it up. This catches his attention because it literally goes right up his alley and he ends up spending the night with her. When he goes to leave, she warns him that he shouldn't bother with calling her because she still can't handle a relationship. That night, Jamie is riding in the car with Bruce and he asks him about what the new sex drug is. Bruce tells him that it's called Viagra and it was found by accident while they were trying to make a blood pressure medication. Of course, everyone wants that account, but Jamie tells Bruce that no one could sell a sex drug better than him. After watching his list of women grow exponentially throughout this film, I'd say that's a solid statement to base his career off of. I'd give him that account in a heartbeat. Jamie, Josh, and Bruce go to a local bar to try and catch Dr. Knight in a good mood, but the Prozac rep is with him. After hitting a soft spot with talking about Maggie, the rep ends up leaving. Now it's Jamie's time to shine. He shows Dr. Knight his keen sense of handling women, and he gets Dr. Knight a date for the night. On the other side of the bar, Josh tries his luck at the same thing.
What do you say we blow this joint and then each other? Okay.
It's safe to say that Jamie got all of the smooth genes in the family. It's amazing to know that Josh got married at any point in his life. Jamie and Josh head back to their house where Jamie calls Maggie. He can't help himself and he tells her romantic sayings. He tries to catch her the next day, but she ends up taking a bus of elderly to Canada to buy prescriptions. She tells him that she'll be back late the next night, but she begs him not to bother meeting her. Of course, Jamie doesn't listen and he shows up the next night. He winds up falling asleep and the bus shows up early the next morning. When Maggie gets off of the bus, she spots Jamie waiting for her there. After seeing that he still showed up, she decides to take a chance on whatever they could be. But she still doesn't want to let it go too far. She knows that she's a sick woman and she doesn't want anyone to get too attached. The next morning, Jamie goes to meet Bruce.
Let the games begin!
Could you imagine being a sales rep for Viagra when it first came out? That had to be some of the easiest products to ever sell. It literally sells itself. In a short amount of time, Jamie and Maggie are living a comfortable life, and the two of them finally become the couple that he wanted them to be. The two of them support each other through the rise of his career, and they enjoy happiness like they hadn't in a long time. One night, when Maggie hears Jamie tell a lie, she tries to understand why he feels like he has to lie to feel good when he's already doing such an amazing job. She reinforces that he really is more than he sees in himself, but Jamie takes it with a grain of salt. Later on, Jamie comes home from work and starts to have a panic attack. When Maggie goes to comfort him, she's in for a surprise.
I love you.
What?
Oh, God. Just give me a second, okay?
That was one of the most intense I love you moments I've ever seen. It's the perfect way to show how far he's come from who he was. She even tries to comfort him by telling him that she said it to a cat once. They are the perfect amount of messed up for each other, and I love it. When Jamie gets back to his house, he comes home to Josh, who is touching himself to Jamie and Maggie's video. After setting him straight, everything seems to go back to normal, until Maggie tries to get back to work. Her tremors are so bad that she ends up ruining the picture she's working with, but when she goes to take her medication, she finds out that she's actually out of the one she needs. At work, Jamie finally talks Dr. Knight into selling Zoloft instead of Prozac, but when he gets back to the house, he finds Maggie is drunk. Apparently, Maggie went to the local clinic to try and get a prescription, but she ended up not being able to. She goes on a rant where she tells Jamie to go be with a normal girl that isn't sick. Normally, I can understand where she's coming from, but once you find someone that you can't do without, you find a way to make it work. I know this film was being pretty lighthearted up until here, but we all knew this story wasn't gonna be just all fun and games. Eventually, there comes the heartbreak, and this is the beginning of it for sure. Jamie ends up bringing Maggie with him to the convention in Chicago, and she ends up finding a support group for Parkinson's people. While she's over there, Jamie is back at the pharmaceutical convention talking up women, but when Maggie beeps him, he comes over and supports her in a heartbeat. The two of them really are perfect for each other. He might end up staying in the back, but he's still there to support her. If it wasn't for the man he met at the snack table, I'd say it would have been a great visit with no drawbacks, but the advice he gets is enough to throw doubt in anyone's mind.
Find yourself a healthy woman.
You have to look at it from everyone's side. This man is still there and taking care of his wife. He still really loves her, but that kind of thing weighs on someone. It comes down to whether or not the person is worth it. If they are, then you got this. After the group, Maggie realizes that this is the first time she hasn't felt alone, and she can't help but tell Jamie how much she loves him. Back at home, Jamie stays up and researches possible treatments for Maggie. He even asks for the help of Dr. Knight in finding cutting-edge treatment for Maggie. The more tests they take, the more they end up wasting their energy. Eventually, Maggie gets tired of being pulled all over the country for a cure that doesn't exist. She realizes that a cure means too much to Jamie, and she ends up telling him that he needs to move out of her apartment. That seems a bit harsh. She barely even tried to talk to him about it before coming to that conclusion. Anyone else would have ran by that point, but he just got caught up is all. A quick realigning talk and things could have been right back to where they needed to be. The two go their separate ways, but neither one of them is happy with the decisions that were made. Maggie reminisces over old pictures, and Jamie still tries to get in touch with Maggie. Dr. Knight ends up inviting Jamie and Josh to a pajama party with a bunch of sexy women. As the night goes on, the woman that invited everyone ends up dragging Jamie into her room where he is met by another woman. As the three of them get a little more comfortable, Jamie gets a little more comfortable in this situation. But when it's all said and done, he realizes that he is having a reaction to the Viagra. I don't think smacking it would be my go-to for a way to get it down, but if that's all you've got left, go for it. Even on the ride over, Josh can't help but thank him for the best night of his life. He realized that meaningless sex wasn't for him, and he's ready to go back to his wife. As they sit in the waiting room at the ER, Jamie gets the page that he got the job at Chicago. When he goes to a restaurant to celebrate, he ends up running into Maggie with her new guy. Bruce shows up and tells her that Jamie made it to Chicago, and she says her goodbyes. Once Jamie and Bruce sit down, Jamie finds out that Bruce didn't actually get transferred to his home in Chicago. Everything is literally set up to make Jamie feel bad for succeeding. If he was a totally heartless bastard like he was portrayed in the beginning, he would have no problem just leaving everyone behind. But he finds a video of Maggie and changes his mind. Jamie drives like a madman to catch up to Maggie's bus that is headed to Canada, and when he does catch up, he waves her bus down to talk to her. She tries to say she doesn't want to talk to him, but he ends up finding his way onto the bus.
I need you.
Please go away.
I drove a really long way to say that.
What, am I supposed to be impressed?
I don't know, yes.
Yeah, he damn near tracked you down all the way up in Canada. I'm sure they weren't the only bus labeled senior citizens on that interstate. Jamie gives Maggie a heartfelt explanation as to why he's so in love with her, but Maggie tries to make him understand that it's only gonna get harder from there. Jamie makes her understand that he knows that, and he doesn't care. He just wants to be with her. Then the credits roll. For a film that had a dozen other movies based on the same premise at the time, it definitely stood out as one of the best. The fact that it tackled a more realistic obstacle than just wanting to be friends with benefits gave it that down-to-earth feeling. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Comment what you'd like me to watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.